First Lieutenant Sarah Chen arrived at Fort Bragg on a cold February morning. She carried a single duffel bag and walked through the gates without saying a word to anyone. The soldiers at the checkpoint exchanged glances. They had seen officers come and go, but something about this woman was different. She was quiet, too quiet. Sarah had been transferred from a classified unit overseas. Her file was thin, suspiciously thin for someone of her rank. No combat decorations listed, no special training mentioned, just basic service records and a note that said, "Administrative transfer." To anyone reading it, she looked like a paper pusher who had somehow stumbled into a leadership position. Sergeant Derek Miller was the first to notice her. He had been running the training grounds at Fort Bragg for 6 years. He knew every officer who came through, and he had broken more than a few of them. Miller was old school. He believed leadership was earned through blood and sweat, not through college degrees and diversity quotas. When he saw Sarah walking toward the barracks, he turned to his buddies and smirked. "Look at that," he said. "Another one from civilian life. Bet she's never held a rifle in her life." His friends laughed. Private First Class Rodriguez shook his head. "Come on, Sarge. Give her a chance. A chance." Miller spat on the ground. "She's gonna be giving us orders, Rodriguez. You think she's earned that? You think she knows what it's like out there?" Sarah heard them. She heard every word. But she didn't turn around. She didn't respond. She just kept walking, her boots crunching against the gravel, her eyes fixed straight ahead. That was her first day. Over the next few weeks, Sarah settled into her role. She ran morning briefings. She reviewed training schedules. She signed off on equipment requests. Everything by the book. But she never raised her voice. She never confronted anyone. When Miller made snide comments during meetings, she simply continued with her agenda. When soldiers whispered behind her back, she pretended not to hear. Miller took this as weakness. He had seen it before. Officers who were too scared to assert themselves, too soft to handle the pressure. He decided to test her. It started small. He would show up late to her briefings, making a show of walking in while she was mid-sentence. He would question her decisions in front of the enlisted men, undermining her authority. He would assign her the worst tasks and then criticize her when they weren't done perfectly. Sarah never pushed back. She took every hit, every insult, every challenge, and she absorbed it like water into sand. The other soldiers started to notice. Some felt sorry for her. Others lost respect. A few, like Rodriguez, wondered if there was something more going on. "She's hiding something," Rodriguez said one night in the barracks. "Nobody is that calm unless they're hiding something." Miller overheard and laughed. "She's not hiding anything. She's empty. There's nothing there. Trust me, I've seen her type 100 times. She'll be gone within 6 months. But Sarah wasn't gone. She was watching. She was waiting. 1 month into her assignment, something changed. A new training exercise was announced, a joint operation with special forces units from across the region. It was a big deal. High visibility, high stakes. The kind of exercise that could make or break careers. Miller was excited. This was his chance to shine. He had been preparing his squad for months, and he was confident they would outperform everyone else. But when the roster was released, he saw something that made his blood boil. First Lieutenant Sarah Chen had been assigned as the lead coordinator for the entire exercise. "You've got to be kidding me," Miller muttered, staring at the announcement. "She's never been in the field. She doesn't know the first thing about tactical operation." He stormed into the command office and demanded to speak with Colonel Harrison, the base commander. Harrison was a patient man, but even he was getting tired of Miller's complaints. "Sergeant, the decision has been made," Harrison said. "Lieutenant Chen has the qualifications for this role. End of discussion." "What qualification?" Miller shot back. "Her file is empty. She's got nothing. No combat experience, no special training, nothing. She's going to get people killed." Harrison leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Sergeant Miller, I'm going to say this once. Lieutenant Chen's background is above your pay grade. You will follow her orders, and you will do so with respect. Do I make myself clear?" Miller clenched his jaw, but nodded. "Yes, sir." He walked out of the office with rage burning in his chest. He didn't know what Harrison meant by above your pay grade, and he didn't care. All he knew was that a woman who had never proven herself was about to lead an operation that could end in disaster, and he wasn't going to let that happen. The night before the exercise, Miller gathered his closest men in the equipment shed. Rodriguez was there, along with Corporal Davis and Private Thompson. They had all served under Miller for years, and they trusted him with their lives. "Listen up," Miller said, his voice low. "Tomorrow is going to be chaos. Chen doesn't know what she's doing, and we all know it. So here's what we're going to do. We follow her orders on the surface, but when things go sideways, and they will, we take over. We run the show." "Understood." Davis nodded. "What if she tries to stop us?" "She won't," Miller said. "She doesn't have the spine. But if she does, we document everything. Every mistake she makes, every hesitation, every wrong call. By the time this exercise is over, she'll be finished." Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "Sarge, I don't know about this. What if we're wrong about her?" Miller stared at him. "Wrong? Look at her, Rodriguez. She's been here for a month and hasn't done a single thing to earn our respect. She's a liability, and I'm not going to let my men die because some bureaucrat decided she deserved to command." Rodriguez didn't respond. He wanted to believe Miller was right, but something in his gut told him otherwise. The exercise began at 0500 the next morning. 300 soldiers from 5 different units assembled at the training grounds. The scenario was simple on paper. A simulated enemy force had taken control of a village, and the combined units had to coordinate an assault to retake it. Sarah stood at the command post, reviewing maps and communications equipment. She was calm, methodical, focused. Miller watched her from across the field, waiting for her to crack. The first few hours went smoothly. Units moved into position. Communications were clear. Sarah's orders were precise and well-timed. Miller had to admit, grudgingly, that she knew the technical side of things. But then, everything changed. At 1100 hours, a real emergency interrupted the exercise. A group of armed individuals had breached the perimeter of the base. It wasn't part of the simulation. It was real. Alarms blared across Fort Bragg. Soldiers scrambled for cover. The exercise was immediately suspended, and everyone shifted to defensive positions. Sarah's radio crackled with panicked voices. Reports were coming in from all directions. 3 armed men had been spotted near the motor pool. 2 more near the medical facility. Shots had been fired. Miller grabbed his rifle and turned to his men. "This is it. Stay close. Stay sharp." He expected Sarah to freeze. He expected her to panic, to call for help, to defer to someone with more experience. But she didn't. Instead, she did something that no one expected. She took command. "All units, this is Lieutenant Chen." Her voice cut through the chaos on the radio. "Lock down sectors 7 through 12. Bravo team, move to intercept at the motor pool. Charlie team, secure the medical facility. No one moves without my authorization." Her voice was different now. It wasn't the soft, measured tone they had heard in briefings. It was sharp, commanding, absolute. Miller stared at her, frozen for a moment. Who was this woman? Sarah didn't wait for acknowledgement. She grabbed a rifle from the nearest rack, checked the magazine, and started moving toward the motor pool. "Chen!" Miller shouted. "What are you doing?" She didn't look back. "My job, Sergeant. You should do yours." Miller hesitated, then followed. He wasn't about to let her go alone, not because he cared about her, but because he needed to see what she would do. What he saw changed everything. Sarah moved through the base like a ghost. Her footsteps were silent, her movements precise. She communicated with hand signals that Miller recognized from Special Forces training, signals that regular officers never learned. They reached the motor pool in under 3 minutes. 2 of the armed intruders were there, using a maintenance truck as cover. They hadn't seen Sarah's team approaching. Miller raised his rifle, ready to engage, but Sarah held up a hand, stopping him. "Wait," she whispered. She studied the scene for a few seconds, then pointed to a flanking position on the left. She gestured for Miller to take 2 men and circle around. She would approach from the front. "That's suicide," Miller hissed. "They'll see you coming." Sarah looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. It wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. It was certainty. "They'll see what I want them to see," she said. "Move, now." Miller didn't argue. He took Davis and Thompson and circled around to the left. Rodriguez stayed with Sarah. What happened next took less than 30 seconds. Sarah stepped out from cover, her rifle raised. The intruders saw her immediately and turned to fire. But before they could pull the trigger, she had already moved, dropping to one knee, firing 2 shots in rapid succession. Both men went down, hit in the legs. At the same moment, Miller's team emerged from the flank. The intruders were surrounded, wounded, and unable to fight back. It was over. Miller stood there, breathing hard, trying to process what he had just witnessed. Sarah walked over to the downed men and kicked their weapons away. She checked their pulses, confirmed they were alive, and called for medical support. "Targets neutralized at the motor pool," she said into her radio. "2 wounded, non-fatal. Moving to secondary location." Rodriguez looked at Miller, his eyes wide. "Sarge, did you see that?" Miller didn't answer. He couldn't. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah led the response to the security breach. She coordinated teams across the base, directed medical evacuations, and personally neutralized 2 more intruders near the perimeter fence. By the time military police arrived to take over, all 5 intruders had been captured, and not a single soldier had been seriously injured. When it was finally over, Colonel Harrison called Sarah into his office. Miller was there too, along with several other senior NCOs. They stood in silence as Harrison reviewed the after-action report. "Lieutenant Chen," Harrison said, "your performance today was exceptional. You saved lives. You protected this base, and you did it without hesitation." Sarah stood at attention. "Just doing my duty, sir." Harrison nodded slowly. "I think it's time the sergeant here understood exactly who he's been serving with." He opened a classified folder and slid it across the desk. "Sergeant Miller, read this." Miller picked up the folder. As he read, his face went pale. "First Lieutenant Sarah Chen, former member of the Intelligence Support Activity. 3 deployments to Afghanistan. 2 deployments to Syria. Recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor. Recipient of the Purple Heart, credited with 16 successful high-value target extractions." Her file wasn't thin because she was inexperienced. It was thin because most of her service record was classified. Miller looked up at Sarah. She met his gaze without expression. He started, but the words wouldn't come. Harrison stood. "Sergeant Miller, you have spent the past month undermining, disrespecting, and attempting to sabotage a decorated combat veteran. A soldier who has seen more action than most people on this base combined. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Miller's hands were shaking. He thought about all the comments he had made, all the tests he had put her through, all the times he had laughed at her behind her back. And she had known. She had known the whole time, and she had said nothing. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know." Sarah finally spoke. "You didn't ask." The fallout from Miller's actions was swift and severe. Colonel Harrison convened a formal review board to examine his conduct over the past month. Witnesses were called. Statements were taken. Every snide comment, every act of insubordination, every attempt to undermine Lieutenant Chen was documented and presented. Miller sat in the hearing room, surrounded by officers and JAG lawyers. He had never felt so small in his life. The confidence that had defined his career was gone, replaced by a hollow shame that he couldn't shake. Rodriguez testified first. He described the conversations in the barracks, the plans Miller had made to sabotage the training exercise, the way he had encouraged others to disrespect Lieutenant Chen. "Did Sergeant Miller ever express any specific threats toward Lieutenant Chen?" the JAG officer asked. Rodriguez hesitated. "Not threats, exactly, but he made it clear that he wanted her gone. He said she didn't deserve to wear the uniform." Davis and Thompson testified next. Their accounts were similar. Miller had created a hostile environment, had actively worked to undermine a superior officer, and had encouraged others to do the same. When it was Miller's turn to speak, he didn't make excuses. He didn't try to justify his actions. He simply told the truth. "I was wrong," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I looked at Lieutenant Chen and I saw everything I thought was wrong with the modern military. I saw someone who hadn't paid their dues, who hadn't earned their place. I was so sure I was right that I never stopped to consider that I might be wrong." He paused, struggling to find the words. "She saved my life yesterday. She saved all of our lives, and I had spent a month trying to destroy her career. I don't have any excuse for that. I was arrogant, I was prejudiced, and I was a fool." The room was silent. Colonel Harrison studied Miller for a long moment, then turned to Sarah. "Lieutenant Chen, do you have anything to say?" Sarah stood. She looked at Miller, really looked at him, for the first time since she had arrived at Fort Bragg. "Sergeant Miller is a good soldier," she said. "He's dedicated, he's skilled, and he cares about his men. What he did to me was wrong, but I understand why he did it. He saw a threat to his unit, and he reacted. His methods were inappropriate, but his motivation came from a place of loyalty." Miller stared at her, stunned. After everything he had done, she was defending him? Sarah continued, "I'm not asking for leniency on his behalf. That's not my place. But I am asking this board to consider that people can change. Sergeant Miller made a mistake, a serious mistake, but I believe he's capable of learning from it." Harrison nodded slowly. "Thank you, Lieutenant." The board deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, their verdict was clear. Sergeant Derek Miller was found guilty of conduct unbecoming and insubordination. He was reduced in rank to corporal, stripped of his training command, and given a formal reprimand that would follow him for the rest of his career. It wasn't a discharge. It wasn't prison. But for a man who had built his entire identity around his rank and position, it was devastating. Miller accepted the verdict without protest. When the hearing was over, he walked out of the building and found Sarah waiting for him. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you speak up for me, after everything I did?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Because I've seen what happens when people aren't given a second chance. I've seen good soldiers destroyed by one mistake." "You're not a bad person, Miller. You're just someone who let his assumptions blind him to the truth." Miller shook his head. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "I'm not offering forgiveness," Sarah said. "I'm offering perspective. What you do with it is up to you." She turned and walked away, leaving Miller standing alone in the fading afternoon light. 6 months passed. Miller, now Corporal Miller, was reassigned to a supply unit on the other side of the base. It was unglamorous work, far removed from the training grounds where he had once held so much power. But he did it without complaint. He had changed. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by a quiet humility that surprised everyone who knew him. He volunteered for extra shift. He mentored younger soldiers. He never spoke ill of anyone, regardless of their rank or background. Rodriguez visited him one evening in the supply warehouse. They hadn't spoken much since the hearing, and there was an awkwardness between them that neither knew how to address. "You look different," Rodriguez said. Miller shrugged. "I am different. What happened to you, man? You used to be so, I don't know, confident." Miller set down the clipboard he was holding and looked at his former subordinate. "I was confident because I thought I knew everything. I thought I could look at someone and know exactly who they were and what they were worth. Lieutenant Chen showed me how wrong I was." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "She's getting promoted, you know. They're making her a captain. There's talk she might get her own command." Miller smiled, a genuine smile, without bitterness or resentment. "Good. She deserves it. You're really okay with that?" "I'm proud of it," Miller said. "I spent a month trying to tear her down, and she still stood up for me when it mattered. That's the kind of leader we need more of." Rodriguez studied him for a moment, then extended his hand. "I'm sorry I didn't push back harder. When you were going after her, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't say anything." Miller shook his hand. "We both learned something. That's what mattered." A few weeks later, there was a ceremony at Fort Bragg. Captain Sarah Chen was officially promoted and given command of a new training unit. Soldiers from across the base gathered to watch as Colonel Harrison pinned the captain's bars on her collar. Miller stood in the back of the crowd, watching quietly. He didn't expect her to notice him. He didn't expect anything at all. He was just there to witness the moment, to remind himself of how far he still had to go. But after the ceremony, Sarah found him. "Corporal Miller," she said. He straightened. "Captain Chen, congratulations." She studied him for a moment. "I heard you've been doing good work in supply. Your CO says you're one of the most reliable soldiers he's ever had. Miller shrugged. Just trying to do my job. That's all any of us can do. She paused. I'm putting together a new training team. I need experienced NCOs who understand what it means to lead. People who've made mistakes and learned from them. Miller's heart stopped. Ma'am, I'm offering you a position, Corporal, if you want it. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. After everything he had done, she was giving him a second chance. Not just any second chance, a chance to rebuild his career under her command. Why? He asked. Why would you do this for me? Sarah smiled, the first real smile he had ever seen from her. Because everyone deserves a chance to prove who they really are. You showed me your worst, Miller. Now show me your best. Miller stood at attention, his eyes burning with emotion. Yes, ma'am. I won't let you down. I know you won't. She walked away, leaving Miller standing in the afternoon sun. He watched her go, and for the first time in months, he felt something he thought he had lost forever: hope. Captain Sarah Chen's new training unit was designated Alpha Company. It was an experimental program designed to integrate soldiers from different backgrounds and specialties into a cohesive team. The brass wanted to see if a more diverse approach to training could produce better results than the traditional method. Sarah handpicked every member of her team. She chose soldiers who had been overlooked, underestimated, or written off. Soldiers who had something to prove. And at the center of it all was Corporal Derek Miller. The first few weeks were difficult. Many of the soldiers in Alpha Company had heard about Miller's past, how he had tried to sabotage a female officer, how he had been demoted and disgraced. They didn't trust him. Some openly resented him. Miller understood. He had earned their suspicion, and he knew that trust would have to be rebuilt one day at a time. He started by doing the work no one else wanted to do. He cleaned weapons after everyone else had gone to bed. He carried extra equipment on long marches. He helped struggling soldiers with their training, never asking for credit or recognition. Slowly, attitudes began to change. Private Elena Vasquez was one of the first to come around. She was a young soldier from Texas, tough and skeptical, who had been assigned to Alpha Company after a disciplinary incident at her previous unit. I heard about what you did, she said to Miller one night, as they were cleaning rifles together. To Lieutenant Chen, Captain Chen. Miller nodded. It's true. All of it. So why are you here? Why would she want you on her team? Miller thought about the question. Because she believes people can change. And because she's the kind of leader who doesn't give up on anyone, even when they've given her every reason to. Vasquez studied him. And have you changed? I'm trying, Miller said. Every day. I'm trying. Something in his voice must have convinced her, because from that day on, Vasquez became one of his strongest allies. She told the other soldiers what she had seen, a man who had made terrible mistakes but was working harder than anyone to make amends. By the third month, Alpha Company had become something special. They trained harder than any other unit on the base. They supported each other through challenges that would have broken lesser teams. And at the center of it all was Captain Chen, leading by example, pushing them to be better than they thought they could be. Miller watched her with a mixture of admiration and guilt. He thought about how close he had come to destroying her career, and how she had responded not with vengeance but with grace. He had never met anyone like her. One evening, after a particularly grueling training exercise, Miller approached her. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Sarah looked up from her paperwork. Granted. I just wanted to say, thank you for giving me this chance. I know I didn't deserve it, and I know some people think you're crazy for trusting me, but I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my career trying to be worthy of it. Sarah set down her pen. Miller, do you know why I really brought you onto this team? He shook his head. Because you remind me of someone I used to know. A soldier who was so sure of himself that he couldn't see his own blind spots. He made a mistake, a terrible mistake, and it cost people their lives. He never got a second chance. He died believing he was a failure. She paused, and Miller saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. Pain, loss, grief. I couldn't save him, Sarah said quietly. But I can save you. That's why you're here. Miller didn't know what to say. He stood there in silence, feeling the weight of her words. Don't waste it, Sarah said. That's all I ask. I won't, ma'am. I promise. A year after the incident at Fort Bragg, Alpha Company was selected for a real-world deployment. They were being sent to Eastern Europe as part of a NATO training mission, a high-profile assignment that would test everything they had learned. The night before they shipped out, Sarah gathered the entire company for a final briefing. She looked at the faces of her soldiers, men and women who had overcome their own struggles to become part of something greater than themselves. Tomorrow, we leave for a mission that will define who we are, she said. Some of you came to this unit broken. Some of you came angry. Some of you came believing you had nothing left to prove. But you're all here now, and that means something. She paused, her gaze settling on Miller. I've been asked many times why I built this team the way I did. Why I chose soldiers that other commanders had given up on. The answer is simple. Because I believe in second chances. I believe that the measure of a person isn't the mistakes they've made, but what they do after. Every one of you has shown me that redemption is possible. That growth is possible. That change is possible. The room was silent. Soldiers who had once doubted themselves sat straighter, their eyes fixed on their captain. We're going into a situation where we'll be tested in ways we can't predict. There will be moments of fear, moments of doubt, moments when you'll want to give up. But I want you to remember this. You are not alone. You have each other. And together, there is nothing we can't overcome. She snapped to attention. Alpha Company, dismissed. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we make history. The soldiers filed out, but Miller lingered. Sarah noticed and nodded for him to stay. Something on your mind, Corporal? Miller hesitated. I just wanted to say, whatever happens over there, I've got your back. No matter what. Sarah smiled. I know you do, Miller. I've always known. He started to leave, then stopped at the door. Ma'am, that soldier you mentioned, the one who didn't get a second chance, who was he? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. My brother. Miller felt his heart clench. I'm sorry, I didn't know. No one does. He was a sergeant, like you. He made a mistake in judgment during a mission, and people died. The guilt destroyed him. He took his own life 3 months later. She looked at Miller with an intensity that made him feel like she was seeing right through him. That's why I do what I do, Miller. That's why I believe in redemption. Because I've seen what happens when people aren't given the chance to make things right. My brother deserved better. And so do you. Miller stood at attention, his eyes glistening. Thank you, ma'am, for everything. Thank me by being the soldier I know you can be. The deployment to Eastern Europe was everything Sarah had promised. Challenging, unpredictable, and transformative. Alpha Company worked alongside NATO allies, training local forces and conducting joint exercises that pushed them to their limits. Miller proved himself every single day. He led patrols with calm precision. He mentored younger soldiers with patience and wisdom. He earned the respect of his peers and the trust of his superiors. The man who had once tried to destroy a fellow soldier's career was now one of the most reliable NCOs in the entire battalion. 3 months into the deployment, Alpha Company received an urgent mission. Intelligence had identified a weapons cache being used by a hostile militia group. The cache was located in a remote village, and Alpha Company was tasked with securing it before the weapons could be moved. Sarah led the operation personally. She positioned her teams around the village, coordinated with air support, and briefed every soldier on their specific role. Miller was assigned to lead the entry team, the most dangerous position in the entire operation. You sure about this, ma'am? He asked before they moved out. I can take a support role if you'd prefer. Sarah shook her head. I need my best people on point. That's you, Miller. Don't let me down. Never, ma'am. The operation began at 0300. Alpha Company moved through the village like shadows, clearing buildings one by one. Miller's team reached the target structure without incident. They breached the door and found exactly what intelligence had promised: crates of weapons, ammunition, and explosives. But they also found something else. Civilians. A family of 5, huddled in the corner, terrified. They had been held hostage by the militia, used as human shields to protect the weapons cache. Miller's training kicked in. He signaled his team to hold fire, then slowly approached the family with his hands raised. It's okay, he said softly. We're here to help. You're safe now. The father looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. He said something in a language Miller didn't understand, but the meaning was clear. Please don't hurt us. Miller turned to his team. Get them out of here, carefully, and call for medical. The kids looked dehydrated. As his soldiers escorted the family to safety, Miller secured the weapons cache and called in the report. The operation was a complete success. No casualties, no collateral damage, and a family rescued from captivity. When Sarah arrived at the scene, she found Miller sitting on a crate, staring at the ground. "You okay?" she asked. Miller looked up. "A year ago, I might have made a different call. I might have seen those civilians as obstacles instead of people. I might have made a mistake that cost them their lives." Sarah sat down beside him. "But you didn't. Because of you. Because you showed me what real leadership looks like. Because you gave me a chance to be better." Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the work, Miller. I just opened the door. You're the one who walked through it." They sat there in silence as the sun began to rise over the village. It was a new day, for Miller, for Alpha Company, and for everyone whose lives they had touched. Alpha Company returned to Fort Bragg as heroes. Their deployment had been one of the most successful in recent memory, and their unconventional approach to team building was being studied by military academies across the country. Sarah was promoted to major and offered a position at the Pentagon. It was a tremendous honor, a recognition of everything she had accomplished, but it also meant leaving the unit she had built from scratch. On her last day at Fort Bragg, she held a final formation. Every member of Alpha Company stood at attention as she walked down the line, shaking hands and offering words of encouragement. When she reached Miller, she stopped. "Sergeant Miller," she said. Miller blinked. "Ma'am, you've been promoted. Effective immediately. Congratulations." Miller stared at her in disbelief. He had earned back his stripes, not through politics or favors, but through months of dedicated service and proven leadership. I don't know what to say." Sarah smiled. "Say you'll keep making me proud. Always, ma'am, always." She continued down the line, but Miller couldn't stop smiling. He had fallen so far, and now he had climbed back up, not to where he was before, to somewhere better, somewhere he had earned. After the formation, there was a small gathering in the rec hall. Soldiers shared stories, laughed, and said their goodbyes. Sarah moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes. Eventually, she found herself standing alone by the window, looking out at the training grounds where everything had begun. Miller approached her. "Penny for your thoughts?" Sarah chuckled. "Just remembering. The first day I arrived here, I knew it was going to be difficult. I knew there would be people who doubted me, who resented me, who wanted me to fail. But I also knew that if I could prove myself, really prove myself, I could change minds." "You did more than change minds," Miller said. "You changed lives. Mine included." Sarah turned to face him. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were everything that was wrong with the military. Arrogant, prejudiced, closed-minded." Miller winced. "Fair assessment. But I was wrong too. I looked at you and saw a villain. I didn't see the dedication, the loyalty, the genuine love you had for your soldiers. I judged you just as harshly as you judged me." Miller shook his head. "You had every right to judge me. I was terrible to you. Maybe, but that's the point, isn't it? We're all capable of being terrible. We're all capable of being better. The difference is whether we choose to grow or whether we choose to stay stuck in our own assumptions." She extended her hand. "It's been an honor serving with you, Sergeant Miller." Miller took her hand and shook it firmly. "The honor is mine, Major Chen. I'll never forget what you did for me. Just pay it forward. That's all I ask. When you meet a soldier who's struggling, who's made mistakes, who everyone else has given up on, give them a chance. You might be surprised what they become." Miller nodded. "I will. I promise." Sarah smiled one last time, then turned and walked away. Miller watched her go, knowing that he would probably never serve under her again. But that was okay. She had given him something more valuable than a command or a promotion. She had given him a second chance at being the person he was meant to be, and he wasn't going to waste it. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever been given a second chance that changed your life? We'd love to hear from you.